The alien fleet arrived without warning. The first signs were subtle, strange disturbances in the atmosphere, brief electromagnetic pulses that caused minor flickers in communication, followed by reports from satellites and telescopes of massive ships appearing from the depths of space. They descended upon Earth as though it were their rightful territory, moving with a kind of confidence born from 1,000 successful conquests across the galaxy. They had invaded countless worlds before, their technology far surpassing anything Earth had, and their intentions were clear. The Overlord had come for Earth. It was not until the fleet broke through the atmosphere and began its descent into Earth's orbit that humanity fully understood the scale of the invasion. The skies darkened for miles, the massive vessels blocking the sun's rays as they hovered ominously above major cities. The sound of their arrival was like thunder, but it wasn't natural. It was the sound of alien power rolling across the planet. No one knew exactly what the invaders wanted, but it was clear they weren't here for peace. World governments scrambled to understand the situation. The military forces were in disarray, caught off guard by an enemy they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Technology that had taken Earth decades to develop seemed insignificant against the alien fleet's weapons, which were capable of laying entire cities to waste in mere moments. Panic set in. People flooded the streets, fleeing in every direction, hoping for escape, but there was nowhere to hide. There was nowhere safe. The cities, the very heart of humanity's civilization, were now in the sights of the most powerful invaders the world had ever seen. Days passed in chaos as the alien fleet made its presence known. As governments collapsed under the strain of the invasion, an eerie stillness settled in. The alien Overlord, whose name remained unknown, issued his first demand through a massive broadcast, transmitted across every communication channel: surrender or face total annihilation. At first, Earth's leaders thought it was a bluff. Surely, they reasoned, the aliens were testing humanity, trying to see if they would bend or break. They didn't know who the Overlord was, or what he wanted, but they couldn't simply submit to such demands. Earth had fought wars before many wars end. It had never yielded to any outside force. And yet, there was something terrifying about the alien fleet. The technology they wielded was beyond comprehension, and their sheer numbers were overwhelming. The choice seemed impossible, but Sarah Matthews, a former military strategist and now one of Earth's last remaining hope, refused to back down. She knew that humanity had faced worse odds before and still survived. Sarah had spent her entire career studying strategy and warfare, looking at past conflicts, understanding how to survive the impossible. What the Overlord didn't know, what none of the aliens knew, was that humanity had a power that wasn't measured by technology or raw force. They had the ability to adapt. While world leaders argued in panic, unable to decide on a united course of action, Sarah began to quietly assemble a team. She'd seen it in their eyes, the same fire that burned in her, the same will to survive. She contacted military leaders, scientists, engineers, and strategists from every corner of the world. It was no longer about standing against an invader head-on. It was about fighting smart, about using the invader's arrogance and overconfidence to their advantage. Humanity's greatest weapon was their unpredictability. We're not just going to let them walk all over us, Sarah said, standing before a table filled with the world's greatest minds. The Overlord thinks we're weak, that we're a primitive species, unworthy of this planet. Let's show him just how wrong he is. We don't need to match their strength. We just need to make them question their ability to conquer us. The plan began to take shape quickly. Earth's best minds worked tirelessly, analyzing alien technology and their ships. Piecing together fragments of the enemy's tactics, it became clear that the aliens relied heavily on their centralized communication network and their power cores. If they could sever those two systems, the alien fleet would lose their ability to coordinate, and their massive ships would be vulnerable. But there was a catch: getting to the alien communication hubs and power centers meant infiltrating the very heart of the enemy's stronghold. That meant sneaking through their defenses, using Earth's own guerrilla tactics and the environment to their advantage. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Humanity had no time to prepare for full-scale battle. It was all about surprise. As the resistance grew in strength, Sarah began preparing the first wave small teams who would strike at the heart of the alien operation. The alien overlords had assumed Earth would simply surrender, fall into chaos, and beg for mercy. But what they had failed to take into account was the fact that humans, despite their vulnerability, had always managed to survive against the odds. Sarah's team would use everything they had: earthly and alien technology, stealth, sabotage, and, most importantly, unpredictability. The aliens had underestimated them. The Overlord, seated in his massive command center aboard the flagship, watched Earth's response with a detached amusement. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds. Earth resistance was nothing more than a small nuisance. He had given the humans a chance to surrender, to avoid the inevitable bloodshed. But now that they had refused, the Overlord had no further use for them. He would crush them. The humans dare to defy us. They will learn the consequences of their foolishness. The Overlord's voice echoed through the control room, calm but filled with an undercurrent of disdain. His generals, alien beings of vast intellect and power, nodded in agreement. The alien empire had never failed. Earth would be no different. But just as the Overlord turned to issue his final orders to annihilate the human cities, one of his generals stepped forward, holding a communication device. "My lord, we have intercepted a transmission, it seems. The humans are preparing something." The Overlord turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. What could they possibly be preparing? The general's voice wavered slightly. "They're building a counteroffensive, my lord. They're forming small resistance groups, disrupting our supply lines, sabotaging our operations." The Overlord paused. He had assumed Earth would collapse under pressure, that their fragile leadership would crumble in fear. But now, it seemed, the humans were organizing, fighting back, and even using their technology against them. "Let them try," the Overlord said coldly, a dark smile creeping onto his face. "They will learn the consequences of their foolish defiance. We will teach them the true meaning of surrender." Back on Earth, as the days passed, the first significant counterattack occurred. Sarah and her team struck at one of the key alien supply depots hidden in a remote mountain range. They infiltrated the heavily guarded base. Using tactics and technology they had reverse-engineered from the captured alien gear. Their goal was simple: destroy the supply lines, cripple the invaders' ability to sustain their forces. But as the operation unfolded, something unexpected happened. They were met with resistance alien soldiers who were more coordinated than they had anticipated. The battle was fierce, but the humans were ready. They adapted quickly, using the terrain to their advantage, luring the aliens into traps and hitting them where they least expected. The alien soldiers, though formidable, were thrown into disarray by the sudden and violent response from the humans. Earth's resistance hit hard, and they hit fast. By the time the Overlord's fleet realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had already caused a ripple of chaos within the alien ranks, disrupting their supply chains and communication networks. The Overlord, furious and now fully aware of the danger humanity posed, was forced to reassess his approach. He had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated humanity, and now Earth's resistance was poised to strike back with a fury the Overlord could never have predicted. The air was thick with tension. After the first wave of alien destruction, the world had slipped into a nervous stasis. Cities were decimated, entire populations wiped out in mere hours. Earth had been brought to the brink of collapse, its civilization crumbling beneath the weight of an enemy that hadn't even broken a sweat. The Overlord's fleet had landed with surgical precision, causing devastation in major cities around the globe. In places like New York, Paris, and Tokyo, there were no survivors. Alien war machines continued to patrol the streets, ensuring that no one dared to challenge them. But what the Overlord and his generals had not anticipated was the resilience of humanity. Despite the overwhelming odds, there was something about Earth's people, something that refused to lie down and surrender. They had been through wars before, countless struggles and moments of near annihilation. What the aliens saw as desperation, the humans saw as will. In the dark corners of the world, deep underground bunkers, and forgotten military bases, the resistance had begun. It was a quiet thing at first. Small pockets of rebels, ordinary citizens, scientists, and military officers who refused to kneel to the alien invaders. They were the ones who saw the opportunity in the chaos. They were the ones who didn't panic but thought, calculated, and planned. Sarah Matthews stood in the dim light of the Resistance's command center, a complex of secret facilities beneath the mountains. Around her were men and women she had handpicked for their resourcefulness and strength. The rest of the world may have been cowering beneath the boot of the alien invaders. But these people, these humans, were preparing for war. "We know their tactics now," Sarah said, standing before a holographic map of the alien fleet. Her voice was sharp, each word calculated. "We've already hit them where it hurts." The supply depot raid was a success, but it was just the first step. The Overlord thinks we're a threat he can wipe out in a matter of days. He's wrong. We're going to make him pay for underestimating us. The room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the equipment surrounding them. Sarah's eyes scanned the faces of the Resistance fighters, their eyes locked on her, waiting for the next move. "You've all seen the damage the aliens have done. There's no going back from that. We've lost too much, but now we have to show them that we're not done. We've taken out some of their communications and supply lines, but it's time to hit their core. We know where their power lies." General Ramirez, a battle-hardened officer with graying hair, spoke up from across the room. "Sarah, their central command ship is too heavily guarded. We don't have the forces to attack them directly. We don't even know how many ships are in their fleet, let alone how many ground forces they've got scattered across Earth. It's a suicide mission." Sarah didn't flinch. "You're right. It's a suicide mission. But if we don't hit them now, they'll wipe us out completely. We have a small window. Their fleet is scattered, and they're still recovering from the disruption we caused with the power core. Their central command ship is vulnerable. If we can take it down, the rest of the fleet will be crippled." Ramirez shook his head, clearly uneasy. "And you think a small force can make it in and out of that base undetected? That's too risky." Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she stepped forward. "We've got alien technology now. We've adapted. If we can disrupt their power grid again and make it look like a natural disaster, it'll take them off the trail. Then we infiltrate their command center and knock out their communications once and for all." A murmur of approval spread through the room. The Resistance was starting to see the logic in Sarah's plan. The Overlord's forces were powerful, yes, but they were arrogant, relying too much on their superior technology and tactics. They couldn't fathom that humans would not only resist, but strike back with such determination. "We have one shot at this," Sarah said, her voice intense. "The next time they come to Earth, they won't expect this. We'll break their morale, destroy their lines of communication, and show them what happens when they make the mistake of underestimating us. It's time for humanity to fight back, and we're going to make sure they understand exactly who they're messing with." The plan was set into motion almost immediately. Using the resources they had scraped together, the Resistance began planning their next move, a covert strike on the alien fleet's communications hub. The first phase of the attack began at dawn. Sarah had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment, carefully orchestrating every detail. A small task force, selected for their expertise and adaptability, had infiltrated the alien-controlled territory where the communication hub was located. They were armed with alien tech hacked and reprogrammed for their use, and their mission was simple: disable the alien central communications, causing as much chaos as possible. Sarah's team moved quickly and silently, traveling in stealth mode to avoid detection. They crossed miles of ruined cities and alien-controlled zones, relying on their knowledge of the landscape to stay hidden from the aliens' patrols. Their journey was perilous, but they had no choice. The longer they waited, the more likely the aliens would recover from their setbacks and retaliate in full force. The team's target was a massive alien facility built into the side of a mountain. It was heavily fortified, surrounded by advanced energy shields, and guarded by elite soldiers. It was a seemingly impossible target, but Sarah wasn't concerned. This was the point of no return. After hours of careful navigation, they reached the facility's perimeter. The alien soldiers patrolled in set patterns, their advanced weapons scanning the area. Sarah's team moved like ghosts in the dark, taking out sentries silently and disabling security systems as they went. Every member of the team was chosen for their skill, and they performed flawlessly. They knew the stakes were high. There was no room for error. As they neared the heart of the facility, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. They were about to strike the heart of the alien operation, the nerve center of their fleet's communication systems. But there was no time to stop and reflect. They had a job to do. They reached the communications hub, a towering structure made of alien metals that pulsed with energy. Sarah gave the signal, and the team moved in. The alien systems were unlike anything they had ever seen, but the humans had adapted quickly, learning to use the captured tech to their advantage. They deployed the virus that would take down the alien communication network, jamming their signals and rendering their fleet blind. System breach in progress, one of the engineers muttered as they set the virus in motion. The facility's lights flickered, and alarms began blaring. Too late. The communication network was compromised. "Let's get out of here," Sarah ordered. "We've done our job." They moved quickly, retracing their steps and leaving no trace of their presence. But as they neared the exit, the base shook violently. The aliens had realized what was happening, and they were not pleased. "We've been compromised," someone shouted. "They're coming for us." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her calm. The team was ready. They had accomplished what they needed to now. It was time to escape. As the team reached the surface and made their way back to the rendezvous point, alien reinforcements began flooding the facility. They were too late to stop the humans. The comm hub was down, and the Overlord's fleet was now blind to the world around them. The battle was far from over, but humanity had made its first real move, and they had sent a message, loud and clear, to the Overlord. "We are not the weak prey you thought we were." The silence after the operation was deafening. The alien communication hub, now in ruins, lay behind them. But the moment of triumph felt fleeting. The humans had struck, yes, but the battle was far from over. As Sarah Matthews and her team made their way back to the underground base, their hearts were pounding with adrenaline, but their minds were already racing ahead, thinking of the inevitable retaliation. The Overlord's forces were massive, and they were not going to take this disruption lying down. Back at the base, Sarah and her team were debriefed, and their success at disabling the alien communications network was celebrated, but only briefly. There was no time to rest. They had learned something vital from the mission. The Overlord was already preparing to retaliate. The alien fleet was already regrouping. Sarah knew this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The Overlord would stop at nothing to crush Earth's resistance. The room was heavy with silence as Sarah addressed the gathered resistance leaders. The flickering holographic map displayed the current location of the alien fleet, and her team's recent success was clearly visible. The alien command ship was no longer fully operational, its communications shattered, but the alien retaliation was imminent. We've crippled them temporarily. Sarah's voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency. The Overlord is already assembling his forces, bringing in reinforcements. He won't take this lightly. We've forced him to adjust his strategy, but we can't afford to wait. General Ramirez, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat and leaned forward. Sarah, we need to think about our next steps. How do we follow up? The Overlord won't just let us keep poking at him. He'll come after us, and he'll come hard. I know, Sarah said. But we have a limited amount of time. Our next move has to be precise, and we need to hit them where it hurts the most. We've learned that their fleet is reliant on their central command system. If we can infiltrate their flagship and disrupt their primary power grid, we can paralyze them for good. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the gravity of Sarah's words. Disrupting the power grid was the next logical step. Without it, the aliens would be unable to coordinate their fleet, unable to launch full-scale offensives. But the risks were tremendous. The flagship was a massive vessel, heavily protected, and the Overlord would never let anyone get close to it without launching a counteroffensive. We need a plan, Sarah continued. We don't have the luxury of time. They're coming after us. If we let them regroup, they'll wipe us out. We strike now, while they're vulnerable. The next few days were a blur of activity. The Resistance worked around the clock, gathering intel, reworking alien technology, and preparing for the final push. Sarah knew that the Overlord's flagship was more than just a symbol of alien might. It was the heart of their entire fleet. If they could disable it, they could cripple the alien forces and give Earth's resistance a fighting chance. The teams were divided into two. One would infiltrate the flagship, while the other would launch a distraction attack to keep the Overlord's forces occupied. It was a risky plan, and there were no guarantees. Sarah and her most trusted officers would take the fight to the flagship, aiming for the power grid deep within the ship's core. It was just before dawn when Sarah and her team launched their assault. The transport ship was small, barely noticeable against the backdrop of the alien mothership. The closer they got, the more Sarah felt the weight of what they were about to do. The flagship was an intimidating structure, its metallic surface glistening ominously in the light of Earth's distant sun. It was more than a ship, it was a fortress. The Overlord had made it impenetrable, thinking that no one would dare to challenge it. But humans had something the Overlord didn't: determination, and that determination had carried them this far. On my signal, Sarah said quietly, her eyes focused on the ship ahead. Her voice was calm, but there was an undeniable edge to it. We go in hard and fast. No hesitation. We disable their power grid and get out before they know what hit them. Keep it tight. We don't get a second chance. The team nodded, checking their equipment one last time. They were armed with alien technology they had modified and adapted. Their weapons were capable of piercing the alien armor. But Sarah knew that the real key was their ability to stay hidden, to infiltrate and strike, without alerting the enemy. The transport ship passed through the alien fleet's outer defenses undetected. Their stealth technology, developed from the very alien tech they had captured, allowed them to slip past the radar, moving like shadows through the vastness of space. Once they were within striking distance, Sarah's team deployed. The ship's landing ramp descended silently onto the cold, metallic surface of the flagship. They moved swiftly, staying low, and using the environment to their advantage. Every step was calculated. Every moment was precious. If they were detected, they would never make it to the power core. The alien soldiers patrolled the halls, their advanced weapons scanning for intruders. But Sarah's team was faster, quieter, and more determined as they made their way deeper into the flagship. Sarah couldn't help but notice the eerie quiet of the vessel. It wasn't like any warship she had ever seen. The interior was stark, almost clinical, with smooth, glowing surfaces and pulsating lights. There was an unnatural silence to it, and the deeper they went, the more Sarah realized that the ship itself was alive in a way, an entity that functioned as a living, breathing organism. It was unsettling, but they couldn't afford to dwell on it. They had a job to do. The further they moved into the heart of the flagship, the more difficult it became to stay hidden. Alien soldiers patrolled the main corridors, and the slightest misstep could alert them to the team's presence. But Sarah's team was experienced. They knew how to blend into the shadows, how to stay one step ahead of the enemy. They moved, swiftly, silently, until they reached the central chamber, the heart of the ship. Inside, the alien power grid hummed with unnatural energy. The machine was massive, a complex array of alien technology that seemed almost alive, pulsating with energy. Sarah's pulse quickened. This was it. They were so close now. "Prepare the charge," Sarah whispered, motioning to Markson. The team quickly set to work, using the device they had developed to disrupt the alien power grid. The plan was simple. Once the device was set, it would cause a cascade failure, crippling the flagship's energy source and taking out their communication systems in the process. Without power, the flagship would be dead in the water. And without the flagship, the alien fleet would be blind, unable to coordinate its forces. But as the final moments of the operation approached, the ship suddenly jolted, a violent tremor, shaking the entire command center. Sarah's heart sank. They had been detected. "Move," she shouted. "Get to the exit now." Chaos erupted as alien soldiers burst through the doors. The element of surprise was gone. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back now. Sarah's team fought back fiercely, using their weapons to push through the alien soldiers. But the situation was becoming more dire by the second. "Hurry," Markson shouted, as he and the others fought to hold back the alien soldiers. "The device is set, but we need to get out before it activates." Sarah's pulse raced as they fought their way to the exit. But the alarms were blaring now, and the entire flagship was coming alive with the sound of alien reinforcements. Time was running out. The alarms blared throughout the alien flagship, echoing in every corridor and sending waves of panic through Sarah's team. The once quiet, sterile hallways were now alive with the sound of chaos. Alien soldiers, alerted to the intruders, stormed the corridors in waves. The faint hum of the power grid had grown louder, more erratic, like the heartbeat of a creature on its last breath. Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest as she led her team through the chaotic maze of the ship. "We've been compromised," Markson shouted as another barrage of alien fire ricocheted off the walls around them. "Get to the transport now." The team moved with precision, their movements honed by years of combat and training. But the alien soldiers were everywhere. Their heavily armored exoskeletons and advanced weaponry made them nearly impossible to beat head-on. There was only one option left for Sarah's team. They had to reach the ship's hangar and escape before the flagship self-destructed. But as they rounded another corner, they were met by an alien officer, tall, with glowing eyes and metallic plating that shimmered in the dim light. The officer's weapon was raised, and in an instant, Sarah's instincts kicked in. She threw herself to the ground as the alien fired, narrowly avoiding the blast. The team retaliated, firing their modified alien weapons with lethal precision. But the officer was quick, moving with a speed and agility that matched their own. "Get back," Sarah ordered, rolling to her feet and signaling for Markson to move. "Ahead. We can't waste time, keep moving." Markson fired a stunned shot at the alien officer, temporarily disabling him long enough for the team to push forward. The alien soldiers were relentless, but they had no choice but to fight their way through. The transport was within reach. But every second spent battling was a second closer to the self-destruct sequence that would end everything outside. The alien fleet was in a state of confusion. Sarah had done what she had set out to do: disrupt the flagship's power core, severing its communication grid, and sending the entire command ship into disarray. But what Sarah didn't know was that the Overlord had prepared for this. He had anticipated a counterattack, and he had prepared countermeasures to prevent Earth's forces from ever reaching the heart of the fleet. "We need to move faster," Markson shouted, pulling Sarah from her thoughts as they sprinted through the ship's corridors. They were getting closer to the hangar, but the ship was fighting back. The hum of the power grid had shifted, now erratic, unstable. It was only a matter of time before the entire flagship exploded. Another explosion rocked the ship, and the entire corridor collapsed in front of them. The team stumbled back, narrowly avoiding falling debris. The pathway was blocked. "Shit," Markson swore, his face painted with frustration. "This is it. This is the way out." Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed a nearby piece of alien debris, a large metal rod, and used it to pry open a hatch leading into the maintenance tunnels. The air inside the tunnels was stale, the passageways claustrophobic, but it was their only chance. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. "Come on, we're not done yet," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. They scrambled through the narrow maintenance tunnels, their movements awkward as they squeezed through tight spaces and dodged more falling debris. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the walls, a reminder that the flagship was slowly spiraling into chaos. Every minute spent in the heart of the alien vessel was a minute closer to disaster. Suddenly, the walls shook with a violent tremor, and a blast of energy surged through the tunnel, knocking Sarah to the ground. The lights flickered, and then went out. The emergency alarms blared, their high-pitched wail echoing through the darkness. A low growl of destruction rumbled from deep within the ship's core. "We're running out of time," Markson shouted. But just as Sarah was about to respond, the ground beneath them shook again, this time with an intensity that knocked the team off their feet. The overload had begun. The power core was destabilizing faster than anyone had predicted. "We have to make it to the hangar, now," Sarah commanded, pulling herself up and taking charge once more. She knew that if they didn't make it to the transport ship, they wouldn't survive. With one last sprint, they reached the hangar, the final gateway to their escape. But standing between them and freedom was an obstacle they hadn't anticipated: the Overlord's elite guards. The soldiers were more heavily armed than any Sarah had seen before, huge, imposing figures in shimmering armor, their weapons trained on the team. They were blocking the exit, and their presence was the final test of humanity's resolve. The leader of the guard stepped forward, his helmet reflecting the dim light. "You are too late, human," he said in a voice that echoed through the hangar. "This ship is dead. Surrender, and I will make your death swift." Sarah stood tall, her heart hammering, but her resolve unbroken. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would not back down now. "You think we'll surrender?" she said, her voice steady. "You think we'll just roll over and die? You're wrong. You're so wrong." Markson fired first, catching one of the guards by surprise. The blast hit the soldier's chest, and he fell to the ground, sparking with energy. The rest of the team opened fire as well, their weapons sending shots flying through the air. Alien soldiers returned fire, but their movements were slower, now unsure of themselves. The chaos and disarray inside the flagship had already started taking its toll. Sarah rushed toward the transport ship, the sound of gunfire and explosions ringing in her ears. She barely registered the alien guard who lunged at her, a massive energy blade in hand, but she reacted instinctively, dodging the strike and countering with a stun blast. The guard crumpled, unconscious. With the last of the elite guards taken down, Sarah and her team reached the transport ship, their hearts still racing from the fight. The ramp slammed shut behind them, and the ship's engines roared to life. "We made it," Markson shouted. But as the ship broke through the atmosphere and began its escape, Sarah looked out at the burning wreckage of the alien flagship, feeling the weight of their victory. They had done it. The silence of space was a cruel reminder of how fragile Earth was. As Sarah Matthews and her team ascended into orbit aboard the stolen transport ship, their hearts were still racing from the harrowing escape. The alien flagship they'd infiltrated was now a burning wreckage, a once proud symbol of invincibility, shattered by human ingenuity and defiance. Sarah leaned back in her seat, exhausted, but her mind was already turning to what came next. The victory, though monumental, was still only one battle in a much larger war. They had forced the Overlord to retreat, but he wouldn't take this lying down. The alien invaders would come for Earth again, with a vengeance. The rest of the team sat in uneasy silence, catching their breath after the battle. Markson, ever the optimist, cracked a small grin as he wiped the sweat off his brow. "That was too close," he muttered, but his tone was filled with a grim kind of satisfaction. "But we did it. We struck their heart, and we made them bleed." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She stared out of the ship's small viewport, watching Earth shrink beneath them. The planet looked peaceful, beautiful in the vastness of space, but she knew better. There was still much to be done. The aliens had been knocked back, but they were far from defeated. The Overlord would want revenge. He had seen what Earth could do, and he would come for Earth with everything he had. Sarah's hand gripped the armrest tighter. The humans had proven they were a force to be reckoned with, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "Where's the rest of the fleet?" Sarah asked, snapping herself back to the present. She turned to the operations officer, who had been monitoring the status of the alien forces. The officer looked up, his face grave. "The aliens are regrouping. It's only a matter of time before they retaliate. The Overlord has pulled back, but we estimate he's bringing in reinforcements from nearby sectors. They've started mobilizing their forces in deep space." Sarah's mind raced. They had struck at the flagship, but they hadn't destroyed the alien fleet, just disrupted it. And now the Overlord, angered and humiliated, was preparing to launch a second offensive. "We don't have much time," Sarah said, leaning forward. "We need to strike again, while the Overlord is still regrouping. We have the element of surprise on our side, but we're running out of it." Days passed in a blur of frantic planning. Sarah's team, with the help of the resistance leaders and scientists, worked tirelessly to craft a plan to capitalize on their success. They knew the alien fleet was recovering quickly, but there was still a window to hit them hard before they could fully regroup. "They won't expect this," General Ramirez said as he stood beside Sarah, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man who had seen countless battles in his time, but even he could feel the stakes of what they were about to do. "We have one shot. If we don't take it, Earth might be finished." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice tight with determination. "We won't just be fighting the alien fleet. We'll be fighting their arrogance. They think Earth is a backwater, that we can't fight back. They've never faced anything like us. We'll need everything," Ramirez added. "The alien fleet might be down, but it's not out. They'll be coming back stronger than ever. We have to push them into a corner." "We will," Sarah said, setting her jaw. "And when we do, we're going to make sure they never forget who they're messing with." The strategy Sarah crafted was bold. The plan was to use a decoy to lure the alien forces into a trap. They knew the Overlord would be desperate to retake control of the fleet's central command. The resistance would create an illusion of a weakened Earth forcing the Overlord to launch a full assault on a decoy station while the real attack would be coming from the opposite direction. It was a classic strategy of misdirection. Wasn't just about the tactics. It was about humanity showing the aliens that they were not weak, that they had a will to survive that couldn't be crushed by brute force. The trap was set. Earth's forces would play the part of the wounded, desperate species. drawing the alien fleet's attention to a seemingly vulnerable location in deep space. The Overlord, thinking he had Earth cornered, would send everything he had to wipe out the resistance once and for all. But when his forces arrived, they would be met with a counterstrike like nothing they had ever faced. As Sarah and her team approached the decoy station in the outer reaches of the solar system, the tension in the air was palpable. They had prepared for every possible contingency, but there was still a gnawing feeling of uncertainty. The stakes were higher now than ever before. Failure was not an option. The moment arrived. The alien fleet descended upon the decoy station, and the trap was sprung. Sarah's team, now in place, activated the real attack, coordinating with every remaining resistance cell on Earth. The alien forces were thrown into chaos as their resources were divided, and they realized too late that they had walked straight into the human trap. But the Overlord was not one to be easily deceived. The moment he saw the trap unfold, he ordered his fleet to regroup, focusing all their attention on Earth's real position. His ships were vast, and they descended upon the real target, the human homeworld. The fight was fierce. The resistance forces, equipped with repurposed alien technology and their own indomitable will, held their ground against the overwhelming alien forces. Sarah's team led the charge, using the very technology the aliens had once believed would destroy them. The alien ships were taken down one by one as the resistance fought back with brutal efficiency. In the midst of the battle, Sarah's eyes locked onto the alien flagship, now descending toward Earth. The Overlord was on his way, and Sarah knew this was the moment that would determine everything. It was a final showdown, not just for Earth, but for humanity's place in the universe. With a battle cry, Sarah and her team boarded a modified assault ship and flew straight for the heart of the alien flagship. The mission was simple: take down the Overlord. They couldn't let him escape. This was their chance to end the war. The assault on the Overlord's flagship was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. The aliens had thrown everything they had at Earth, but humanity's resolve was a force of nature. As Sarah and her team fought their way through the flagship's defenses, blasting alien soldiers and taking down energy shields, they moved closer and closer to the Overlord's throne room. Finally, they broke through, and there he was, the Overlord. Towering and imposing, the alien leader stood at the center of the room, his cold gaze fixed on the humans who dared challenge him. "You think you've won?" the Overlord sneered, his voice a low growl. "You're nothing. Your kind is nothing." But Sarah stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "We're everything you've underestimated, and now it's over." With a final, decisive strike, Sarah and her team took down the Overlord, ending the war. As his massive flagship spiraled out of control, the rest of the alien fleet began to retreat. Humanity had won, against all odds.